Hey everyone, welcome to another live sessions at the Reactors. My name is Rav and I'm the program manager at Reactor London. Before we get into the session, please take a moment to read our code of conduct. We're all here to learn, so please be respectful of other people's views. Please be mindful and please the chat's going to be open throughout, and we do encourage you all to participate. So just be kind, be courteous, and let everybody have their opinions. Today, we have a very, very interesting session from one of our Founders Hub members, Nikhil. He's going to talk all about building a startup using Microsoft Azure Cognitive Services. And with that, I'm actually now going to hand it over to him. Hi, Nikhil.
Hi, Rav. Thanks for the introduction, and it's great to be here. Super excited for this session. So just to introduce myself, my name is Nick. I am an AI engineer, and I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Vast Minds, which is a Founders Hub member. And just to give you a bit of a brief about Vast Minds is a AI digital health technology startup that primarily has used the Azure technology stack to build our products and take that to market. So one of the things I'm super excited about is building a startup and getting it to market as fast as possible. Really, that's the key for any startup. And the way we could do that is by leveraging the toolkit in Microsoft Azure. Microsoft Azure has an amazing set of tools. And the purpose of these sessions in these series is to see how can we bring those tools together to actually build a solution that solves a problem. That's the main key. Now, one of the things I would definitely encourage anyone to look at is the overview of the Azure Cognitive Services suite. It is an amazing set of tools that you could use to supercharge your development process. So, as a startup, our mandate is to be as lean and as quick with development as possible. So we can either get to a minimum viable product in the quickest and also most capital efficient way. So I would definitely encourage you to have a look at Azure Cognitive Services. There are various APIs that you could use for speech recognition, for computer vision tasks, and others. So definitely would encourage you to look at the entire suite. But for this specific presentation, we are going to focus on one product, which I think is the coolest, in my opinion. And that is Azure Open AI. And this is a relatively new product that was added to the Cognitive Services suite. Just to give you a preview, when you go on to the Azure Open AI page, you'll see something like this. Now, one thing to note is if you do want to get your hands on playing with the Open AI models, it is in a pre-release stage, so you will need to apply, but it's pretty simple. You would just go to the Azure OpenAI service webpage, click Apply Now, and fill in this form. And someone from the Azure OpenAI team will review that and get back to you whether your application is successful or not. So first recommendation, definitely go through this form, fill out your details, your subscription IDs, and you can, if successful, you'll get your hands on some API keys to actually use the Cognitive Services suite. So anyway, let's get into the fun stuff, which is actually solving business problems. Now, one question that I'd want you to think about, so to any of the audience here today, one question I want you to consider is how many hours you spend processing your emails per day. So I would just have a ponder on this and think to yourself, how many hours do you actually spend processing your emails per day? The actual answer may probably surprise you and also pose a bigger problem for us to solve when it comes to productivity. So maybe let's assume that you have a number in your head. So the actual average time that users spend processing emails is 2.24 hours per day. So just think about whether you were close or not to your prediction. That is 582 hours per year, and that amounts to 24 days per year we as a user spend processing emails. And that's quite alarming, because that is a lot of time we spend on a relatively trivial task. And this can cause stress, distraction, loss of productivity, especially, let's say, if you as an entrepreneur, you're a busy individual and you go on holiday and you come back and there's a flurry of emails. You will spend a lot of your first days back just processing those emails. So really the motive here is, how do we solve this problem using Azure's cognitive service? Because if we can even solve this problem by 50%, so if we can cause a 50% increase in productivity for a user when processing their emails, we save them 12 entire days per year. So I would consider that pretty significant, and actually a service that you'd actually have users paying for, which is the ultimate goal with any startup, is to actually validate your concept and have paying users. So we're going to build live today a solution to solve this problem. Now, ultimately, the whole goal is reclaiming our time with the help of AI. And the solution that we're going to build here is a tool, again, using Azure's Cognitive Services, just to repeat, that automatically reads our emails and categorizes them into certain categories, of our choosing. We can actually choose how we want the solution to categorize our emails, but it will categorize them. And let's think of an example category such as sales opportunities. So instead of looking at 200 unread emails in my inbox, it would be able to tell me which ones are potential sales opportunities. Because let's say if I was a sales individual at a company, those are the emails I should be tackling first, and with greater care. And then we can categorize, we can put emails into certain other categories, such as, support requests or customer support. The whole goal, let's circle back to the problem, is to help people be more productive when processing their emails, because it just takes an unexpectedly long time every day to process your emails. And then what this solution will do as well is it will actually generate a suggested response to each of your emails, which is pretty cool. So for example, if let's say a customer emails us and says, hey, I need help with, I've spotted a bug in your product, can you help me with this? We could even generate a suggested response to that email, which I think is just amazing. Now, we always want to think about who would be the target persona for this type of solution. So who is the target market? And I think if you consider a typical, relatively young entrepreneur, age 25 to 40, who's super busy, juggling more than 5,000 things at once, they are probably the type of individual that has the greatest need to purchase a solution that supercharges their productivity. So initially, I would say for this type of problem and this type of solution, we would initially target busy entrepreneurs who, again, have the greatest need of being as productive as possible. And there is a global addressable market of 500 million plus entrepreneurs. So, a lot of people use emails. That's just the name of the game. So this is a big problem to solve. Now, let's start diving into some technical architecture of how this solution will be built. So this is where it gets really interesting. The first thing we'll want to do is let's assume a user is a Microsoft Outlook user. The first thing we'll want to do is authenticate with something called the Microsoft Graph API. Now, the Microsoft Graph product is a pretty powerful product that allows you to get information about, let's say, a user's profile, their email, and other bits and bobs about a specific user, all directly through an API. And we'll be primarily using the Microsoft Graph API to get emails from a user. Remember, we want this solution to be able to read and categorize emails. So we need Graph API to feed us the user's emails. And so what Graph API will do is it will get a bunch of emails. So we will have a bunch of emails to look at. Those emails, and I'll show you exactly how this looks in Graph API, but those emails don't look like they're in the best, prettiest format. So we will have to do some parsing. We'll have to parse those emails so they are in a slightly more readable format. And once that is done, this is where the cognitive services kicks into play. So we then have two things that Azure Open AI will do. The first thing is it will classify this email. So it'll classify whether this email is, either, let's say, we're talking about a startup here or entrepreneurs in a startup who would use this. So let's say this email may be a sales opportunity or investment opportunity or customer support and so on. This is one component of what Azure Open AI will do. We'll then allow for a user to update classifications, but that is something we'll leave optional for now. But the next step is we'll actually use Azure Open AI to generate a response to that email. And this is the whole technical architecture of the product. And so ultimately, we're not selling a technical solution here. We're actually selling for any entrepreneur to become a hyper-productive entrepreneur. Like I said before, if we look at the problem, we spend 24 days per year processing emails. So if we can make them 50% more productive, we've just saved 12 days per year, which doesn't sound like a lot, but there's a lot you can do in 12 days. So really, the whole goal now is let's build the solution. This is the most exciting part. Now, before we dive into the code, which we will exclusively be using Python to build this solution, I want to go over a few components so that you can understand this a little bit better. So, for example, Microsoft Graph API. Now, to get a feel of the output of Microsoft Graph API, what you want to do is you want to head to something called developer.microsoft.com, and you want to head to the Graph Explorer, and you will land at a page like this. And the first thing you want to do is actually sign in to your own account so you can actually pull in data about yourself. And the way you can do that is by clicking on this sign in button here. And I will actually go through the process now. So I'll sign into my account. I will enter my password. I have multi-factor authentication on, which everyone should have, in my opinion. Okay, I'll get a one-time code to my account. So that's okay, great. And that should have successfully signed me in. So yes, I will stay signed in. There we go. So my tenant is Vastminds. That's the company that I'm part of. And what you can do with this Explorer is you can just send requests, without any code. So you can see exactly what comes out of Microsoft Graph API. So if I run this query, which is, about me, it's pretty cool. Like I get response about me. So I get my name, I get my job title, my email. I don't have a mobile phone or office location stored. But that is, if you can just call this API, you've just used Microsoft Graph in, less than a couple of minutes using no code. And then I can look at different API requests. So I would recommend just looking at these 8 get requests here to get started. So I could look at, let's say, all of the items in my drive and run that query. Item not found. Okay, for some reason this is failing. But the main request we're going to be looking at here is getting my mail, right? So again, we're building a solution to automatically read and triage an individual's emails. So if I run that query, you can see it's now actually got a bunch of emails. So you will get a JSON response back. And in that response, there is a key called value. And within that, it's effectively an array of email objects. So there are certain different things about each email. I can see the subject. I can see the body preview. This is just a quick preview of actually the content of that email. The importance is read. So this is not read. This is an unread email. It's not read. It's false. And the content. This is the raw HTML content. So I don't know if you can. Oh, I've got a comment saying this is blurry.
Yeah, hi Nick. Yeah, the screen is a bit. I don't think it's blurry. Do you think you can zoom in slightly?
Here we go. Is that better?
Yeah, that's much better. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Rav. Okay, so hopefully that's better. But yeah, so this is the response from the Get My Mail API request. And so we can see a bunch of things here. I can see the importance is normal. I can see it's unread. I can even see the entire content type of the email. Now, this is all in HTML form, so it is just ugly as anything. There's no way I would want to pass through this entire thing and start reading this email. It's just, the response is just absolutely ugly, but it's not unusable. We can still use this. So I will actually show you a way to pass this entire email. So let's come out of this should give you a good overview of Microsoft Graph itself. And we're going to come out of there and actually start building some code around the solution. One thing I always like to do is just refer to the architecture so we know exactly what we're building from. So let's dive right into it. So I'm going to bring up VS Code. This is my favorite code editor. I don't know about yours generally, but VS Code is my favorite. And let's maximize the screen. Okay, great. So I've got an empty project here. We're going to start directly from scratch. And I'm going to build in a new file. Now, one of the components we want to build is some way to connect to the Microsoft Graph API in Python. Now, as far as I'm aware, I have not seen, well, publicly, any Python wrappers for the Microsoft Graph API. So I'm going into that in a little bit in most detail. Is kind of out of scope of this episode. But what I've done and what will be publicly available is a script that you could use with easy to use functions that can pull relevant information about yourself using the Microsoft Graph API. And I will go through that. I'll go through each function briefly. So let's create a new file here called Microsoft Graph API.py. Right, and so I'm going to zoom into my editor here so the screen is not blurry. And so what we want to do is we want to build in a few functions that connect to that Graph API and allow us to get information about our emails. Now, one thing you'll need to do is you'll actually need to register an Azure AD Azure Active Directory application. And the way you could do that is if you head over to Azure portal. Generally, you will have access to the portal if you are an admin. You want to head over to Azure Active Directory, and you'll want to head over to app registrations. Now, you can create a new registration. The steps to do that will be available on my GitHub, so I won't go into detail now. But what will happen is when you register a new application, you will be given a client ID and some other IDs that you'll need to use when calling the API. So I created one earlier. I called it Zip It. This is just a funny name I came up for this type of product. It's like, how can we zip away all the emails? So I just called it Zip It. And you'll get a couple of things. You get an application ID, you'll get the object ID, you'll get the tenant ID as well. Really, the main thing that matters is the application ID. You will also need to generate a certificate and secret. But again, the details to set up this application out of scope of today's episode, but will be all of the information will be available in my GitHub. So if we go back to VS Code, so we're going to build a script called MS Graph API. I've actually already built this for you. So I'm going to paste some code in here and show you exactly what each function does, so you get a better understanding of how you can interact with the Graph API in Python. So let me just, I'm going to paste some code here. Let's see if this works. Yeah, great. Okay. So let me zoom in slightly again. So I'm going to just briefly walk you through what's happening in this script. And then once I've done that, we'll get into the meat of the cognitive services integration, which is using Azure Open AI to classify the emails coming through Graph API. So one thing we'll want to do is we'll want to configure Graph API. And the first thing we'll need is an application ID. And that you can get from Azure Portal. So like I just showed you on the other screen, in fact, if I bring up Azure Portal again, I just want to make sure that this is super, super clear. So what you want to do is you want to make sure once you've registered your app, you want to copy and paste this value, which is the application client ID. So copy and paste this value and set it as a variable in your Python script. The next thing you can do, and again, by the way, this entire script is on GitHub, so you do not need to rewrite this code. You can simply use this as a wrapper. The next thing it does is it defines an authority URL for authorization, as well as a base URL. And this is actually the base URL for the Microsoft Graph API. And the scopes within this are actually reading emails. Eventually, we probably want to write emails as well. A mail read basic is just another scope that we bring in. It's just good practice to do so. So to be able to actually connect to Microsoft Graph API, you'll need to be able to generate an access token. So I've created a function here, which actually generates an access token for you and caches this. So you don't need to do this over and over again. And what this will do is it will get an access token using this method. MSAL is the Python library for Microsoft authentication. And then what you'll want to do is we'll actually want to cache this token and store it in a file. So, and this file, let's call this API token access.json. Now, this will not exist. Consider this non-existent when you first run the script. This will not exist. So given that this doesn't exist, we'll go over to the next line, which is actually authorizing with the actually application ID, which I mentioned earlier. And what that will do is that will get a bunch of accounts. If there are accounts, and I'll use this method, get accounts method, to actually get the accounts that were returned from this. And if accounts do exist, we will actually get a token. Otherwise, if they don't, then what this code block will do is it will generate a one-time code that I could use to open up a browser. So again, this is all available in the GitHub. This is wrappers that I created so that you do not have to create this. So eventually what you would do is once you pull down this repo, you would start from an empty script. We're going to do this right now. So let's call this main.py. This is our main Python script. So what we're going to do here is import some relevant libraries. So let's import NumPy as NP. Let's import pandas, because pandas is always useful for data frame manipulation. Let's import, I don't know, import requests. Yeah, why not? That could come in useful. So you see, actually, I have suggestions in VS Code. So I'm actually using GitHub Copilot for this. I would highly recommend this for developers who want to supercharge their productivity. So what I'm going to show you show you is exactly how you can integrate with Microsoft Graph API using Python, and it's super simple now that I've built this rapidly. So let's actually execute this. So if I say main was main, what I'm going to do here is I'm actually just going to import all the functions from this script here. So I'm going to say from MS Graph API import. I'm going to put everything. So if you're not familiar with the syntax, import star will mean it will import all of the functions. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to say access token. So I need to get an access token to be able to interact with the Microsoft Graph API and generate access token. So if you recall, there's a function in my script which is generate access token where I pass in an application ID and the relevant scopes. So you can see here, the application ID is here, and I pass in a bunch of scopes. Now, once I call this, what I want to do is get the a bunch of emails from my account, again, using the script. So let's label this as getting the access token. So we're getting the access token here. Very simple, one line of code, one function you can use to generate an access token. You just need to modify your application ID, like I mentioned in the other step. The next thing we want to do is get a bunch of email messages from the user. And again, I've defined a super simple function to be able to do this. All you need to call is, let's assign a variable called emails. And when there's a function called all mail, you're going to pass your access token through one of the arguments. And the second argument is the number of emails. So let's just say we want to get the last 10 emails for now. That should be fine. And just to actually check when getting something, let's just print the emails. Okay, great. Now let's run this and see what we get. Okay, so give it a second. There we go. Okay, generate access token is not defined. Let's see what's going on here. So we're going to go back to MS Graph API. Okay, it looks like we might need to specify the application ID. Okay, so let's bring in the application ID here. Again, this ID you can get from the Azure portal, which I mentioned. Okay, so let's try this again. Generate access token is not defined. That's strange. Let's have a look here. Oh, okay. Okay, no worries. Let's try and build that back in again. That is strange though. We are putting directly from the Microsoft Graph API. Okay, let's try that one more time. Okay, so at this step, right, if this keeps failing, one thing you want to do is just check. I'm going to check the Azure portal to make sure the application ID is correct. So if we go back to Azure portal, and we're just going to double check the application ID here. App registrations, then zip it. Yeah, great. Okay, so I have VS Code on my other screen, so I'm just going to check this. So that is that is correct. Okay, let me try one more time. Okay, cool. Right, I understand the error now. So what I will do actually is I'll just bring in another window here. Okay, so okay, yeah, that's fine. You don't actually need to specify the application ID like I did previously. So as long as you can build in the Microsoft Graph API, then you actually don't need to specify the application ID. So one thing I would highly encourage you to do is, if you do have access to the GitHub link that Rav just deployed in the channel, you'll be able to see all of the functions we went through before here. So all the Microsoft Graph API functions. So if you're interested, I would highly encourage you to look at the GitHub link. But so what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a couple of things. So first of all, we're going to get the last 10 emails, and we're just going to print these emails. So if I go ahead and print emails, here we go, and we're just going to have a look in the terminal to see what we get. So if I run that, okay, great. So we're getting a bunch of responses from the Graph API. But again, like we saw in the Graph Explorer, it's all a bunch of gibberish. This doesn't really make much sense. So what we need to be able to do is we need to be able to pass we need to be able to pass this HTML content so we can extract the email body. And that's where in this Microsoft Graph API script, this is where I've defined another function called parse email. Here we go. There we go. So what this function does is it passes an email object and retains only the relevant information in the dictionary. And what it does is it starts off by defining a dictionary called email, and starts appending values to it. So we get the response, which is this, let's call it gibberish, and we start appending the information here to this email object. So we have the ID, we have the subject, we have the received date time, we have from, to, inference classification, and we have the body. And this is where two things happen. First, we actually get the body text. So not all of this is actually relevant information. We have to actually extract the body text. And I've already defined a function to be able to do this, which extracts the raw HTML from the body of the email. The second thing we have to do is actually get the text from that HTML, because, looking at this text, it's not really something we can understand. And I've defined another function called getTextFromHTML, which extracts the text from a HTML document, and it uses some regex expression to pass and extract the body contents of that email. So again, you don't need to really worry about the script. You just need to worry about how to use these functions. So what we can do here is we can actually say, we can actually loop through all of these emails and parse them so they are a little bit nicer to read. And we can use the function I defined before called parse email. So let's delete this print statement. We no longer need this print statement anymore. What we're going to do is we're going to start looping through the emails. So we say for email in emails. Now, if you do not recall, we actually had the email response wrapped in a key called value. So it's important that we reference all the email lists in the key called value. That is super important here. And so what we are going to do here is I just want to check that that's correct. Yeah, so what I'm doing is I'm just checking on the Microsoft Graph Explorer. We actually get, the response is kind of a little bit strange in that all of the emails you need to access in the key value, because there are some other information attached to this. But that's fine. So what we'll do is we'll press ahead. So what we want to do now is we want to loop through all the emails, and we want to pass them, right? And you can use the function I actually created. So we can say pass, let's say pass email equals pass email dot email. And this pass email function is defined here in MS Graph API. So you can see it passes the entire response. There we go. And then for example's sake, let's actually just print the past email so we can have a look at what it looks like. So let's run this again. And so in the terminal, we should be able to see something a little bit more readable. And if I actually open up a text file, so let's open up email placeholder.txt. What we're going to do is just take a response and place it here. You could actually see now we've got the subject of the email, we've got the receive date time, we know who it's from, meetup group, who it's to, the classification, which is focused, and the body. And you can now see the body is now not wrapped in HTML, it's wrapped in raw text format. \n just means new line. So hello, this is a quick announcement that on the 8th, see, this is now much more readable, that on the 8th of December, we'll be hosting, and this seems to be some marketing email about a meetup. So we now have the past email, which is great. There's actually a lot we can do with this. Now what we want to do is, if you remember our architecture diagram, we want to be able to actually classify those emails using Azure Open AI. So this is where the cognitive services, this service comes into play. And there's a couple of things that you want to do. To get started, the first thing you want to do is head over to the portal, and you're going to have to create a resource for Azure Open AI. So if you successfully get access to this, you'll be able to create a resource. And again, the steps will be available in my GitHub, but eventually what you want to end up with is a resource that looks like this. So you can name it whatever you want. I've called it Azure Open AI Vast Minds. You can find it by typing in OpenAI and services, and then you can go ahead and create your own. It doesn't take very long. It is a priced service, so this needs to be under specific subscription, which is valid. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with OpenAI. Just to give you some business context, OpenAI is a separate company. Microsoft have a heavy investment, I think about just over $1 billion in Azure OpenAI. And you can now access the entire Azure, the entire OpenAI product stack directly from Azure, which I think is just absolutely amazing. But once you create a resource, what you want to do is click this button here to explore. And what this will do is it will take you to this page, and you can actually play with a bunch of things here. So if I go to, let's say, classified text, for example, it will give you a sample code that you could use to classify a bunch of text. But you can also open this in Playground. So before you start coding, I would highly recommend anyone using the OpenAI service to start working in Playground first. And the first thing you want to do is you want to structure what's called a prompt. A prompt is defined as a piece of text that tells a generative AI service what to do. So I could say the following. I could say classify the following email into one of the following categories. And I could say one category could be a sales opportunity. One category could be an investment opportunity. One category could be customer support, and we could just say other, right? Because there may be just some pointless emails that we want to get rid of. And what we want to do, so we've kind of told OpenAI the structure of what we want to achieve. The next thing we'll want to do is we'll want to say, okay, well, what is actually the email? So let's make up an email. So we could just say, hi there, I'm interested in, and let's make up a, if someone received this, let's just make up a sales opportunity email. So we could say, hi there, I'm interested in licensing your product. Can we please hop on a call to discuss this further? Right, so if I read that email, this is a pretty good sales opportunity, right? There's someone interested in purchasing our product. And then what we want to do is we want to prompt OpenAI to finish this classification. So, and this is exactly how we would structure a prompt. You have to think of it as if the model is actually completing what you're about to type. So I'm not going to type the classification here, but I'm going to allow the model to generate one. So it's kind of you're kind of doing 80% of the work, and the model has to do the last important 20%, which is actually generating the classification. And what I can do is I can click generate. Great, and it's generated. It's got it right. I would say that it's right. It's a sales opportunity. So we can see it's generated a sales opportunity. I'm actually going to zoom in this a little bit so you can see here. Now let's try something else. So let's say, hi there. Let's try an investment opportunity. Hi there, I'm interested in investing, let's say investing in your company. Could you give me some more details? Now, as a human reading that, it's pretty obvious that's an investment opportunity. Let's see if the model gets that classification right. So I click generate. Yes, it got it right. Investment opportunity, fantastic. So you can see this is a simple text prompt you could give this model, which could generate human-like responses and actually contextualize what you're trying to achieve here, which is what's so powerful about Azure OpenAI. And what we're going to use this to is, this is our classification. This is our email classification. What we're going to do is we're going to feed this model emails, and this model is going to give us classifications so we can better triage. The next thing we're also going to do is actually tell the model to generate a response to that email. So we could say, another example of a prompt we should do is, let's keep the email there. But another thing we could say is generate a response to the following email. Okay, so the way you structure a prompt is, what's your objective, an example, and what do you want to achieve? So we want to achieve a response. Now, I have no idea what this model is going to come up with, but let's have a look. Generate. Okay, that's pretty cool, actually. Okay, so it's generated this entire response. Hello, thank you for your interest in investing in our company. We'd be happy to. It's exactly what I would say. So I think it's fantastic. It's an absolutely fantastic model. This is really a game changer for a productivity of someone who is just processing emails nonstop manually. Okay, great. Now, the whole objective is, how do we get this into a format where we can build this into our product? Now, the great thing is we have something called Codeve. And once you click on that, it gives you the entire snippet that you could use to generate the output that I just showed you. And it is really that simple. And if I go back to VS Code, I've created another script called Azure OpenAI. And you could see I've literally copy and pasted that code view. So if we go down, what I've done is I've created, I've assigned the Open AI API type to be Azure. Again, this is all from the playground. I've just copy and pasted the code here. There's only two things we need to do. So if you recall, we actually did slightly modify the way we were speaking to this model, depending on whether we were classifying a email into a certain category or actually generating a response. So what I've done is I've defined two strings here. One is a classification prompt. So you probably recognize this from the playground. This is where we classify the following email. So I've given the model of objective here. So classify the following email into one of the following categories, which is sales opportunity, investment opportunity, customer support, personal, other. These are actually 5 categories. And then we've put email in curly brackets here because we want to actually, we want to create a placeholder for the email because we don't know what the email is yet. We want to actually get that from the inbox using Microsoft Graph API and place that into this string. The other thing is a generation prompt. So how do we create a response to the following email, create an email placeholder, and again, the model should finish off with a response to this email. And then I've defined 2 functions. One is classify email. And what this function would do is it would take in as an argument an email body. Again, just to reiterate for anyone who's just joined, all of this is available on GitHub, so you will not have to write this code from scratch. I just want to reiterate that. But what this function will do is it will get an email body. It will place that in the classification prompt again. So when we're doing something like a string.format and passing a variable through that variable is now taking the place of the placeholder. So it's great. We can retrospectively fill in parts of a string, which is fantastic. So that's a simple function to classify the email. Again, you can get this directly from the code view. So if you go onto this playground, you can even write in your own prompts that say classify the email. And you can see if I click in code view, it already has generated the prompt, the entire prompt for me. So very, very, I just want to stress, it's just unbelievably simple to use. And then we want to generate the response. Now, the one thing we'll want to do is actually want to just test these functions. So I created two test strings here. So one is classifying an email. So I define a string called email body. Hi, I'm looking to license your product. Can you help me out? And so we want to classify that, right? Is that a sales opportunity, customer support? The other thing we want to do is test the generation, which is where we generate a response to that email. Now, we can look at the output directly in the terminal. What I actually might do is, just to make this a bit more clearer, is say print classification, and there we go, classify email. That will make the output in the terminal look a bit more neat. So we can just say print, generate a response, there we go. Okay, so let's try and run this and see what we get. So let's make the terminal a little bit bigger. Now, I would expect, before I run this, I would expect this to be a sales opportunity, and I would expect the model to come up with a nice response to respond to this lovely person who wants to license our product. So we can see here, okay, so let's have a look at the terminal. We can see, yes, sales opportunity, great. Now it's generated a response for us. Hi there, thanks for reaching out about licensing our product. We'd be happy to help you out. Please let us know what specific product you're interested in licensing, and we'll provide you with more information. Fantastic. We've just built an Azure, we just built a prototype solution using one of Azure's cognitive AI services. And the main thing we'll want to do now is we'll want to put that all together, right? So we'll want to pass all the emails. If we go back to our main script, which is currently less than 20 lines of code, what we want to do is get access, authorize access to our Microsoft inbox. We'll want to get the last 10 emails, loop through those emails, parse them so they are easy to read. Now that we have the parse to email, what we want to do is get the body of that email so we can classify it and also generate a response. So this parse to email is effectively just a dictionary. So if we look at the email placeholder, it's just a dictionary. So we can reference the subject by referencing the subject key. We can reference the received date time by referencing this. So what we can actually do, we want to get the body of that email. We can just say, let's call it email. Let's define another variable called email body. And we will reference the body of that past email. And that will give us the body. And then what we want to do is we want to call our OpenAI services, which is in this script called Azure OpenAI. So I'm going to uncomment this line so we can bring in all the relevant functions through. And we are going to, let's say, first thing we want to do, let's just make this easy to read. We want to classify the email. Okay, great. So what we want to do is then say, okay, classification. Classification is classify email, which is the function we define in this script. Classify email. And we want to pass through the email body. So this should generate a classification, and then we can just say print classification as classification. The next thing we want to do is generate a response. And in the same way, let's say let's call this generated response. We want to use this function, generate response, which comes from the Azure OpenAI script, generate response, to generate a response to that email. We can print that, generate response equals generate response. And that is, yeah, let's go ahead and run this and see what we get. So we're going to go ahead and run this. Okay, so now what it's doing is it's doing we're doing the whole stack here. So we're actually getting all of the emails, we're classifying them. The terminal output looks messy, but don't worry, I'll go through that. We're getting all the emails from the user's inbox, we're classifying them, and we're actually generating response. And this is an automated tool that is doing this all for us. We're not even touching our inbox at this point, and it's already generating responses to our emails. So what we could actually see is we can see classifications that are being generated here. So we've got investment opportunity. We've got generated response. You know what? Actually, what I'm going to do to make it slightly easier is we're going to actually just print the body of the email. Print the email body, so it's slightly easy to use. So print body of the email. It's email body. Okay, and then we're going to run that again. So fingers crossed that runs perfectly this time. Yeah, there we go. Okay, I can see some emails coming through. They look like emails, so I'm guessing. Yeah, and what we're going to do is we're going to just we're going to copy and paste some of these emails into a text file. And then we can just have a look at some of them and see if the classification was correct or not. So let's go ahead and copy and paste a bunch of these. We don't need to copy and paste everything here. There we go, that should be fine. Okay. Let's just delete this. We don't need this anymore. Okay, great. So one thing you'll want to note with OpenAI, this does happen a lot, is you'll want to be wary of passing too many tokens through to the API, because what will happen is that there is only a maximum of 4,000 and something tokens that are allowed in that prompt, and tokens are classified as some number of characters. If you pass too many, then you won't actually be able to generate a response. OpenAI will just tell you that this is just too much. So for example, let's have a look at, let's have a look at one email here. Okay, cool. So, okay, here's one email. It looks like gibberish, but let's try and see what it says. Okay. This is an email body that's generated. Okay, so I'm going to just put a breaker here so we can read the body of this email. So this was actually the body of the email that we printed. So let's just put a line here. So body of the email. And this body says, we invest in early stage companies building the future of healthcare. So apparently this is an email I got at some point. Tell us about your company. We also empower enterprise organizations with the knowledge, resources, and interested, reach out to us. So just reading this as a human, I think this is a investment opportunity. And if we scroll down, here are a couple of requests made to the Open AI service. We can just, we can ignore these requests. They're just, we don't need to look at these for now. And let's just get rid of these requests also. What we're really interested to see is how the model classified this. So yes, this model classified this email as a investment opportunity and even generated a response. So it says, thanks for sharing this information with us. We are always interested about new developments in the healthcare industry. Now, I don't think that generated response will do it. I think we'll need to add some more to that. You could say, we need to probably say to that person, we're always interested about hearing new developments and interested to follow up with you to see if you'd like to invest in our company. But essentially, this is effectively this tool using this service can effectively, it can categorize thousands of emails in one go, put them into placeholders so that you could prioritize and process emails more effectively. That's the end goal here. And so really the promise here is making you super productive as a busy individual using these services. And now that we kind of build a prototype and pieced a bit of the codes together, one of the things you want to think about is when building an early stage prototype is how you would price the product. So this could be slightly difficult, but you have to think about what is the value of saving a user's time. And I've kind of just said, let's call it, would someone pay $10 per user per month for this product? Maybe, but this is something that we need to test in the market. So once you've built your prototype, you need to be able to get this in the hands of users and have them testing this and actually validate whether that price is correct. Because you could argue that if you make an individual 50% more productive, and that costs only $10 per user $10 per month, and you've saved them 12 days per year, I think that's worth more than $100. So pricing is not, when it comes to software as a service products, pricing is not really a science, it's a bit of an art. It requires a lot of testing and feedback to see, what is the correct price for your product. But in terms of some of the future work we'll want to do here for this product is, I think it'd be really nice if we actually built this product within a Teams application. So within a Teams application, you'd be able to see different categories of your emails and see how many are in them, so you can prioritize and go through your emails. Another thing we'll probably want to do is fine tune the responses. So I'll leave that for the audience to go ahead and look at how to do this. But Azure Open AI allows you to actually fine tune models. This is something you should read. So customize a fine tune model. This is something that you should read in your own time. It allows you to generate responses which are slightly fine tuned to a pre-existing response. So, you could actually fine tune the model to respond like you, but you need to provide lots of examples of how you would respond. Then I think one thing that would be pretty cool is actually implementing the sending APIs. So what would actually happen is after some point, when you trust the model enough, you would automatically allow the model to send emails on your behalf. And I know that sounds super scary, but it's something that we're actually not too far away from, in the near future. And so this is some of the future work, which I hope gives you a good idea on, what the product generally does, what it takes to build a product, and where we would actually place this product in the market. Because as a startup, you want to get to the market as fast as possible, and generate revenue as soon as possible. And that kind of wraps up my presentation. So, and just thank you for listening. I hope that gave you a good overview of the Azure Open AI suite. It is a super powerful and impactful collaboration between two technology giants, that is Microsoft and OpenAI, that will allow any Azure user to license the OpenAI product directly under their Azure subscription. I generally think, I'm super bullish on the field of generative AI. And so I'm very excited to see where this field goes. So I hope this will give you inspiration to use Azure's OpenAI product in your own product stack to see what interesting things you could build. But that's it. Thank you for listening. You can scan this QR code if you're interested in connecting with me. I'll just go back to that for a second. Yeah, you can scan this QR code if you're interested in connecting with me. I'm more than happy if anyone has additional questions on my GitHub, or just anything in general about the OpenAI service. I'm more than happy to delve into this. But aside from that, that's it for me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. If Rav, I'm not sure if we have any time for questions.
I think we can answer one question.
Okay.
It's from Saro Lovito. He says, they say, super interesting. A question: is it allowed to create profit from your own product using using Azure under Microsoft Azure license?
Yeah. Hey, Sarah. Actually, no, Sarah. But yeah. So can we create? Of course, absolutely. I mean, so any product that's licensed under Microsoft, the whole goal of this series is to show you how you could generate revenue and actually get to profitability as soon as possible by building a product which doesn't really cost you much. I mean, as soon as you sign up to Azure, I think you get $120 in free credits. If you sign up to Founders Hub, you get additional $25,000 in Azure free credit. So the whole purpose of leveraging Microsoft's Azure technology stack is to be able to get to market in the fastest possible way, in the most cost efficient way. So you effectively don't spend much building a product, but you actually have a product at the end of it that can generate revenue and in turn, generate a profit, which is the holy grail of any startup business, especially in today's day and age.
Right. Perfect. Apart from that, we had some great compliments. People saying thank you, great intro to the technology. But yeah, thanks very much, Nick. We'll see you next week, same time, same day, with another episode. And to all watching, thank you all for joining, and we'll see you next week.
See you guys. Thank you for tuning in.
Bye.